Hello and welcome to Paper Plays Julie K. Thank you so much for stopping by, and today I have a process tutorial of how I created this vintage style altered muffin tin. To begin with, take a muffin tin and sandpaper. Lightly sand the muffin tin front and back and inside each of the cups. I use this method to provide a little texture to the tin, which will help with the paint having a surface to stick to, as sometimes glossy surfaces can be hard to paint. Next, wipe down and dry the muffin tin, removing the dust particles created during the sanding process. After the tin has been cleaned and dried, add a layer of paint. I will be creating a crackle effect, so I start with a dark layer of paint. I'm using the Waverly brand chalk paint in a truffle color, which is a dark brown. Make sure to paint both the back and the front and also the insides of each of the muffin cups. Once the brown paint has dried, you will need to add a crackle medium. I'm using crackle medium by Folk Art Plaid. Add an even layer of this medium to the muffin tin, making sure that you have painted this on the back and front and also inside the cups. This medium is necessary for the crackle effect to occur. Make sure you let this layer dry before moving on to the next step. After the crackle medium has dried, paint a layer of Waverly chalk acrylic paint in a plaster color. Add this lighter paint to both the front and back sides of the muffin tin along with the inside of the cups and let dry. As you begin to paint, you will notice a crackle effect forming. It is important to not overwork this lighter layer of paint. So far, I'm loving the crackle effect on the muffin tin. It has a nice vintage feel to it. Once the lighter paint color has thoroughly dried and crackled, I like to add a layer of gloss medium and varnish from Liquitex. This step is optional, but I find that this extra step provides a little more protection to the tin, especially when it comes to paint chipping off. I apply this varnish with a paintbrush to all areas of the tin and let dry. Next, I start decorating the plastic cups by adding a base layer of paint. These cups will sit in the muffin tin and hold embellishments or goodies for the recipient. I use plastic Tupperware cups from Gladware. I do lightly sand these and paint 2 layers of the Waverly chalk acrylic paint in plaster color. I do many of these steps off camera. When I paint the second layer, I use more of a sponge brush and dab on the paint to add a little texture to the cup. In the end, I do love the look of these cups, but since they are plastic, it is possible for the paint to chip off, so they need to be handled with care, which can be a downfall to using paint on plastic cups. I sand and paint a total of 6 cups to fit in the muffin tin, and then I begin to decorate them. To begin with, I decorate the cups using some tea-dyed vintage bridal trim and attach it using Fabri-Tac adhesive. Later on, I also go ahead and attach some bead trim up at the top edge, which you will see later in the video. Next, I die cut out 6 circles from scrapbooking paper that has lace trims on it, and I ink the edges using coffee colored archival ink and attach to the base of the plastic cups using Eileen's tacky glue. I then switch back to decorating the muffin tin. I attach small doilies to the inside using Fabri-Tac glue. While the doilies are drying in the muffin tin, I switch back to decorating the cups again and attach a string of pearl trim to the top edge using hot glue. I decorate all 6 cups in this manner with bead trim at the top edge. Next, I start to embellish the muffin tin. I add a layer of vintage trim that will hang off of the side. I attach this trim using hot glue. I add a second layer of trim that has some gorgeous bead and bead dangles on it, again applying this using hot glue. Next, I attach vintage tea-dyed bridal trim and appliques to the top of the muffin tin using Fabri-Tac glue. I start in the middle and work my way out. I continue to add pieces of trim to the top until it is covered, and I am happy with the way it looks. I admit that I am loving how this altered muffin tin is progressing. I know that I'm going to have a hard time giving it up. In the end, I do end up attaching 2 pieces of blank to finish up the look, which I show later in the video. Now on to making flowers. So the next step in our altered muffin tin is to start filling it with goodies and then also creating some flowers for the tops. And I've already started filling it with goodies, which I will show you guys that at the end of what I'm going to fill in there. But I decided I would go ahead and show you how I create one of these little flowers. They're kind of some shabby vintage flowers. And so here's my start of my flower. It looks like this. And so I'm going to show you guys how to create something very similar to this. And so to begin with, what I do is I just cut a bunch of circles, and you can create these flowers with any number of sizes of circles, so don't get hung up about the size or even how many circles you cut out. But I am cutting out 3 1/4 circles, 2 3/4, 2 1/4, and 1 3/4 if you need to know. And I like to mass produce these types of flowers when I decide to do them because they are a little bit of a labor of love. And so what I started off with then with this 3 1/4 size is I cut four pieces, and this is out of a synthetic material. And it came off of a pantsuit that I cut up that I purchased at the thrift store. I just liked the color and I couldn't find anything like this at Hobby Lobby for material to buy. So I just purchased an outfit and cut it up. But again, you want to make sure you use synthetic material. Then I also cut up organza, and I cut up 4 pieces of organza. And the organza I bought at Hobby Lobby. They do have a number of different colors. And again, I cut that with 3 1/4. And then I did the same for the 2 3/4. I cut up 4 pieces of the organza, and I also cut up 4 pieces of the synthetic material. And then I just had a couple scrap pieces of lace that are approximately that size, and so I did cut those up. I might trim them to a smaller size yet, I'm not sure. But I do have some lace. You can also throw in tulle if you want into these flowers. And then I also did the same. I cut up circles. You can see them right here off to the side. I did 4 of the synthetic and 4 of the organza in the 2 1/4 size, and then also the 1 3/4 size. These types of flowers you can make a lot bigger, so you can start off with bigger size circles. You can do, you know, a 6-inch circle or a 5-inch circle. Again, my biggest circle today is 3 1/4 inch. The next step is you are going to want some sort of candle, and I like these little larger size tea candles, and then you just light it. And make sure when you guys are working with fire or flame that you have some water close by, which I do have a cup of water off to the side that you can't see on the camera. So the next step is to go ahead and we're going to burn our circles. And I like to have a little tweezers. And if you just hold it kind of close to the flame, it's the heat that makes it, and you can kind of see it starting to burn on the little edges there. So that's kind of what it looks like. So I'll do one more on camera and then I'll finish them all and then show you how to put the flower together. So again, that's kind of what that one turned out like. And I also burn my organza, so I'll do that one real quick with you guys, just the edges. When you guys cut out your circles, they don't have to be perfect circles. I mean, if you look at my circles already, they're not perfect, and especially once you start burning them, they're not going to be perfectly round. So that's what the organza one looks like. So I will come back after I have burned the rest of these, and I don't burn the lace, just so you guys know, because that will start on fire. Okay, the next step is to go ahead and add our layers together for this first part of the flower. And so as you can see, I've kind of layered them up biggest to smallest. And I'll just start with one of the bigger pieces. I'm just going to add just a little bit of glue in the middle. You guys can also use Fabri-Tac glue if you don't like to use hot glue. That works also. And then I'm going to put on, I have a little, I'm not quite sure what they're called, but I bought this at Hobby Lobby. And it just helps protect my finger from the hot glue. So I have those 2 layers, and I think I'm going to add, I have 1 piece of lace here, so I'm going to add that next. And again, I didn't heat the lace like I did the other pieces, again, because the lace would burn. You want to make sure if you're burning pieces that you're using synthetic material. And you can add as many layers as you want or as little as you want. And in whatever order, I usually just kind of play around with them and just see what looks nice. So I think I'm going to add another larger layer, and then I'm going to move on to the smaller ones. So that's kind of what we have so far. And with what I cut out, I think I can make a second flower, but I'm just going to keep on going with this flower. I'm happy with the way that looks for my kind of centered flower piece. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a little bit of eyelash trim, not a lot, and I'm just going to bunch it up, and I'm going to end up sticking that right here in the middle. And then I'm also going to, and I'll glue that in a second, I'm also going to decide if I want, what I want as my middle piece That looks pretty. I also have this little one. I like that. I have some of these, which I've already used on some flowers, so I'm not going to use those. And I have that one. Or I can also add some little pearls like this. You can also stick buttons in the middle if you want. But for some reason that one's just standing out to me right now, that middle piece. So I'm going to go with that one. And so I'm going to glue those two items down. And this item is just this piece of bling is actually a button. But you can also take apart jewelry also for your bling. So that's that part of the flower. And so now I'm going to add some layers. You can of course just leave it like this if you want and glue it onto a project. But again, I'm trying to create a little bit bigger of a flower, you know, something similar to this size. And so next I'm going to maybe glue another piece of that lace that I have underneath that. And I'm going to add some doilies, and I have a doily pile right here that I'll dig through. And I'm just looking for something that's a little bit bigger than what I already have. So that one looks like it'll maybe work, or that actually looks kind of neat. I'll leave those two like that. So I got some doilies, and then I think I'm going to gather some ribbon underneath that. And so I have some of this vintage ribbon that I'm going to use, because I'm going to put that underneath this layer. And then I'll probably add another doily, and then this is my base piece. And so I'm going to gather this one up, and for those of you who don't know how to do this, you can use this with any type. You can either use it like this one has a little bit of gather in it, but I'm going to gather it up more, or you can use a flat piece of lace. So I have a long needle and thread. And so the first step is just to tie your thread on or not on the end. And I just reinforce it a couple of times before I start to gather it. So once you've tied your knot onto the end of it, you're just going to go in and out with your needle. And if anybody's wondering, this is approximately 22 or 23 inches. And I'm not sure if we'll use it all or not, but if you want to know my starting length, that's what I'm starting with. And again, I'm just going in and out. And this is the reason why I like the long needle, is I can go quite a ways on the needle before I have to pull it through, the thread through. And for those of you that are familiar with this, this is called a running stitch. This is just one way to make a flower layer. You can also, if you want, just gather it up and glue it onto a small piece of felt. That works also. I just like to do the sewing with the needle. I just like to try to use as little glue as I possibly can when I make my flowers. So I can just start pulling my thread through. And then as you tighten it, you can kind of see it stays gathered like that. And I don't think that that's big enough, so I'm going to keep on going in and out until I'm happy with how it looks. While gathering my trim, I do stop several times to pull the thread through and also check the size in comparison to the upper flower layers. So here's what it looks like so far, and I did decide to use the whole 22-23 inches. And I'll pull it a little bit tighter here in a second. But I think that'll look good as a layer underneath this. You'll be able to see all the trim around the outside. And so then what you do is just pull your string, because that gathers it more. And then to finish it off, you can, if you want to use hot glue, glue it together, or I just glue this, or not glue, but I just sew these two sides together here. After I get this one pulled tight enough. So I'll just take my two ends like that, and I'll just sew them together. And it doesn't have to be perfect because this is going to be covered, so some of my threads get entangled, but I'm not too worried about that, just because, like I said, you're not going to see it. And so I do like to sew these two together, but my needle came out, so I got to thread it here again. So again, I'm just going to do a little running stitch just to kind of glue or sew these two together so that it's a closed flower layer. Then I'm just going to sew a little knot at the end. So that's what it looks like. And then here's a similar one that I did with different lace. So you're going to get different looks with different laces. So now, like I said, I'm going to layer these up and glue them together. I like how that looks, like that. And then I will find one more doily for under there. So I picked out a doily that fits on top of that. And so the next step then is just to go ahead and glue all these layers together. And again, I'm just going to use my hot glue gun. So there's our base so far. So now for this flower, you guys, I am mixing and matching lots of different techniques. You can, of course, just layer up a whole bunch of doilies to make a doily flower. You could just layer a whole bunch of gathered pieces like that to make a flower, but I like to kind of mix and match mine for this type of flower. So you just have to make whatever type of flowers you like that make you happy. And then for the final piece, we're going to go ahead and glue this on. So that's what our completed flower looks like. And then again, we'll just go ahead and put that on top of our tray. So I'm going to finish the rest of the flowers and I'll come back and show you what it looks like. So here's all the different flowers that I created in the centers. And then here's what it looks like. Again, the cups that we created. And I filled them with all sorts of goodies. And so in this one, I just decorated some chipboard hearts. And added the word love. In this pocket right here, I added some little altered paper clips. And I added a tag to them. There's some paper, some eyelash trim, a button. And then hanging off of each one, I do have a clock, a button, and a piece of leftover snippets of lace. And my thought with tags on here is for the person that I'm gifting this to or swapping with, I figured she could attach these to pieces of lace if she's selling them in her Etsy store or on a project, and she could put the person's name on here or a thank you, so they each have a tag for that reason. In this pocket, I added just some more small flowers that I created, so there's 4 in there. And she can use them as is, or she can layer doilies and other items underneath them. In this container right here, I went ahead and added some little small specimen jars, and I added, these are some flat back, they're kind of like opal pearls, in that one. And on this one, I added some little roses, some little fabric roses. All of them have the little pink ribbon bow and a tag on them. This one just has some little bling pieces in it. And this one's some flat back pearls. This one also is some flat back bling. And this one also has some flat back pearls in it. In this container, I went ahead and decorated some clothespins. These are fun to add to packaging. And so they all have kind of pastel vintage colors on them. But that's basically what they all look like, just different colors. I added a little lace snippet and some eyelash trim and a flower. And then in this pocket or containers, I added some altered paper clips, and they all look very similar. Some of them have buttons instead of the bridle trim on them, and that's the back sides of them. And for those, what I like to do is I like to decorate little bags like this where you stick little goodies in, and then you can use the paper clip to hold the bag shut. And of course they work good in junk journals, or if you want to send a couple pieces of paper or ephemera, you can use the paper clip to hold them together while you gift them to somebody. So that's everything that I've included in this altered tin. Okay, so now that I've shown you everything that I'm going to add into my containers, I do want to add one last item to decorate my tin. I kind of felt like my muffin tin, I felt like it was still missing something. And if I had made my little flowers smaller, I might have added more built up flowers or something on the outside. But what I went ahead and decided to do was I'm going to add these two pieces of bling that kind of have a vintage feel to them. And I'm just going to put them right here with some hot glue. But I think that'll work nicely because when you put the flowers back on, you'll still be able to see these, and it adds just a little bit more decoration. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then I'm going to call this good. And I'm just going to use hot glue for that. So again, that's kind of what it looks like. So thanks again for watching my process tutorial on how to put together this gorgeous vintage type themed altered muffin tin. Please feel free to leave any comments or questions that you have below in the description box. Until next time, I hope you guys all have a wonderful day and happy crafting.